I'm going to read to you what the greatest American Marxist, the leader of the American Communist Party, during its period of great strength, this is what he said about how communists in the United States should organize, what they should advocate. It's from his book, The Twilight of World Capitalism, 1949. In order for the people to put the United States firmly on the path toward peace, democracy, and general well-being, the power of the monopolists who dominate our country must be curbed and finally broken, and the people themselves must take political charge under the leadership of the working class. The struggle for socialism grows inevitably out of the everyday fight of the workers and their allies, especially against the present menaces of economic chaos, fascism, and war. In all good time, the American people, on the basis of their existing conditions, will decide how and in what forms they will introduce socialism. The way our party foresees the possible development of the future is along the following general lines. First, we propose the regular election of a democratic coalition government based on a united front combination of workers, small farmers, black people, professionals, small business groups, and other democratic elements who are ready to fight against monopoly, economic breakdown, fascism, and war. This type of united front government could well have behind it the overwhelming majority of the people, and as it has in other lands. It goes without saying that the election of such a democratic government could only be brought about in the face of powerful and very surely violent opposition from organized reaction. The whole history of the American class struggle, which is full of examples of employer violence in strikes and in other mass struggles, teaches this lesson with unmistakable clarity. The bitter attacks made against the Progressive Party, led by Henry Wallace during the 1948 elections, gave a sure indication of the frenzy and desperation with which the capitalists would confront a People's Front combination that was strong enough to actually threaten their control of Congress and the presidency. Obviously, it would be an extremely difficult proposition to truly elect a democratic government in the face of this strong, violent, and reactionary opposition. Second, our party contends that such an anti-fascist, anti-war democratic coalition government, once in power, would be compelled either to move to the left or die. With state power in its hands, it would be forced to pass from the more or less defensive program upon which it was elected to an offensive program. Confronted with the sabotage and open resistance of big business, it would have no other alternative than this if it hoped to realize any progressive legislation of its program and to ensure staying in power. A people's government would be forced to proceed directly and undermine the power of big monopolies by adopting far-reaching policies of nationalization of big banks and major industries. The breakup of the big landlords, the beginnings of a planned economy, and the elimination of reactionary elements from control of the army, the schools, and the industry, as well as various other measures to weaken monopoly and strengthen the working class as the leading progressive force in the nation. Third, a democratic, anti-fascist, anti-war government under the violent attacks of capitalists in its efforts to find solutions to burning economic and political problems, if it were to survive, would necessarily move leftward towards socialism, much as the people's democracies of Eastern Europe and Central Europe are now doing. Some liberals believe that a united front coalition government in this country would introduce a regime of progressive capitalism, but this is a naive and dangerous illusion. Capitalism is now in its monopoly stage and is hopelessly reactionary, Any people's government in our times, in order to be progressive or even to live, inevitably must move towards socialism. American socialism, beyond question, will have its own specific forms and methods, but basically it will be the same as socialism in other countries, with monopoly capitalism completely defeated, the industries and natural resources in the hands of the people, production for general use instead of profit, and the working class as the leader of the whole people. Only in this way will this country and the world finally be freed from the dangers of poverty, economic chaos, fascist slavery, and murderous war. These steps could be taken by a people's government, notwithstanding the opposition of the capitalists, however violent. To promote the election of a progressive coalition government of this type, which by force of circumstances would move to the left and eventually to socialism, on the general pattern of Eastern people's democracies, is obviously not to advocate a program of force and violence. The enemies of the Communist Party, to the contrary, notwithstanding. The charge by the Department of Justice that our party advocates the forcible overthrow of the government is a brazen and conscious lie. The plain fact of the matter is that the communist movement in this country, as well as abroad, since the Seventh World Congress in 1935, has been going along on the practical working theory that in this period, because of the broad mass struggle against fascism and war, it has become possible in a whole number of democratic countries, including the United States, legally to elect democratic governments which could, by curbing and defeating capitalist violence, orient themselves in the direction of building socialism. Is it possible to elect such a democratic coalition, anti-monopoly government in the United States, the stronghold of world capitalism? It is a sinister fact that the civil rights in this country, notably since the end of the war, have been seriously whittled away. But the United States is by no means at the stage of fascism. He's writing this in the middle of McCarthyism. Nor do we communists consider American fascism to be inevitable. The big popular upsurge in recent presidential elections was a dramatic justification of our faith in the democratic strength of the American people. It showed a profound anti-fascist, anti-war sentiment among the masses. In the end of an economic crisis or a war, this mass democratic upsurge would be vastly greater and more clear-sighted. Our party's political line is based on the assumption that it is possible, under the present political conditions in the United States, for the broad masses of people, militantly led by trade unions and a strong mass political party, to elect a coalition anti-monopoly government. How long this possibility may last in the face of fascist trends in this country is problematical. But if we should get fascism, if the United States were reduced to the level of fascist Spain, then the communists will know how to reshape their policies to meet that kind of situation. It may well be asked, what resistance will American capitalism be able to make when the great masses of people finally decide, as they surely will, to establish socialism? Today, American capitalism is strong, but it is not as strong as it appears to be, nor has it got the permanent lien on its present strength. Now it is true, Wall Street is the world bully and is busy trying to organize civil wars in various countries to arm itself and other capitalist countries for another world war. But what will its power of resistance to socialism be when, as may be likely, the vast bulk of the rest of the world has gone to socialism, when its own foreign markets have largely dried up, when it is undermined by economic crisis? Sorry, this is making me emotional. When it may have just about wrecked itself by its projected world war, and when the working class has developed Marxist-Leninist ideology and set out to bring about socialism. It may well turn out that it will be far easier for the American working class in the midst of a socialist world to establish socialism in this country than now appears to be the case, with American capitalism at the peak of its strength. Who can foretell such things? Certainly, we Marxist-Leninists do not engage in prophecy. Wow. Folks, he was talking about right now. He was talking about the times that we are living in. This book was written in 1949. And in 1949, he predicted the very moment that we are living in right now. I am going to read you exactly the sentences that this is shocking to me, right? He's saying, you know, these people say communist revolution could never happen in the United States. I mean, he's literally talking about if the circumstances that are starting to unfold in this country at this very moment were happening, there could be a socialism. Right? He's saying, but what will its power to resist socialism be? When the vast bulk of the rest of the world has gone socialist. Look what's happening with the Belt and Road Initiative. When its own foreign markets have dried up. Look at what's going on right now. When it is undermined by economic crisis. Hello. When it may have just wrecked itself by its projected world war. And then the last part, our job. When its working class has developed a Marxist-Leninist ideology and sets out to bring about socialism. It may well turn out that it will be far easier for the American working class in the midst of a socialist world to establish socialism in this country than it now appears to be the case with American capitalism at its peak. He's talking about right now, folks, when the foreign markets have dried up, when the rest of the world is moving towards socialism. He's talking about right now. This is utterly amazing. Right? I've told you all before, we are living in the last days of American capitalism. And what SNL is psyching us up for with their fascist crackdown, the reason that there have been so many vicious attacks on me for daring to try and teach Marxist-Leninist ideology and teach what socialism actually means, which is not, I gotta start a cooperative in the woods and we all share the profits from my pencil factory, is because it's happening. We are living in the last days of American capitalism. It's happening. The circumstances that William Z. Foster predicted that socialism could come to the United States are happening at this moment, right? They have lost control of the international markets. The crisis is here. The rest of the world is moving towards socialism. China's economy has outstripped the United States. Countries like Vietnam are surging ahead. It's happening. We are living in the last days of American capitalism. This book that William Z. Foster wrote in 1949, beautiful book, by the way, The Twilight of World Capitalism. And he's writing this amid McCarthyism. He writes this at a time where people were in federal prison for being communists, where it was illegal to be a member of the Communist Party. He writes this book. It's worth reading. I don't agree with everything in here. A lot of the stuff he says about, you can read it for yourself. I'm not going to totally review the book, but the dedication of the book. He dedicates the book to my great-grandson, Joseph Manley Kolko, who will live in a communist United States. Seriously. This is beautiful stuff, folks. Remind yourself over the next week or 2 weeks or the next year. We are very lucky to be alive in the time that we are living right now, because we are living in the last days of American capitalism. And the future, as awful as things look in our time, the future is looking up. The circumstances are getting ready. The world's appetite for what we have to offer, is becoming stronger and stronger and stronger. But only we can do it. Only we can do it. We can't count on anybody else to do it. There's a reason we have to do what we're going to do. All right, I missed some super chats, so let me